Hey y'all, I'm Heather. I am a wife and a mother and an insurance agency owner, a friend, and a PTA advocate. I am so excited to talk about all of the things that I find most precious here within our community, within our lives, and within our faith, friendships, and relationships. Here on Heather's Most Precious. All right, so speaking of Heather's Most Precious,
Hey-o.
friendships are at the top of that list. So I'm here with my good friend, Michael Crosa.
Hi.
Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello. My name is Michael Crosa. Your name is Heather Hendrickson.
There we are.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so my business is called Chattanooga Podcast Studios. In the related Podnooga network. I help people with their podcasts, both building and recording them and editing them, making them, and then also just getting them out there and publishing and monetization and all that kind of stuff.
That is very cool. Now, Michael and I met at a B&I group. Mm-hmm. We kind of joined around the same time, it seemed like, right?
I think so. I think you beat
right
me by a couple months, but yeah, we were like, right in the same.
You'll hear that I beat him. Winning. So our B&I chapter, which meets on Mondays at 4:30, and we've formed a lot of good friendships within our cute little chapter, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. For those who don't know what B&I is, Business Networking International. It is just you kind of find your group. It's a group of people, which becomes a chapter. If you're gonna be honest.
Yeah. And for reference, I think there's about like 20-ish chapters in Chattanooga. Yeah.
And they're in like 80 countries, something crazy.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
But it's just an area, a space that you meet with people. They learn about your business, you learn about theirs, and it's kind of a group that you pass referrals back and forth. And honestly, what it's become, I think it's fair to say for both of us, is a group of friends that just help you become the best version of yourself within the field that you're in. And they want to help you grow your business as you theirs. And it's neat to be able to have a place where you can talk business owner or professional to another. Brainstorm ideas and strategies and then also, right, like what would you do in this situation or things like that. I think it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and I think for me, I think this is kind of what you're getting at, but like for me, I don't have like coworkers, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's a way to feel like there's a group, like I'm going in to see these regular people and like all that kind of stuff, even though they're completely different industries. And then, there have been a couple times where it's like, hey, I'm having this issue with a lawyer that I hired. So other lawyer in this group, like, what am I missing? Like, what am I, how should I be thinking about this situation? That's been really helpful. And then you were talking about the referrals. Yeah. To me, that's like the really cool part. That's the whole game of it. It's like, I think a lot of times networking events are about gimme business, and then but B&I is kind of designed around this idea: how do I give business? Right. How do I refer people that I know? How do I listen to because you have your insurance business, right? So if I'm out and about, how should I be listening for people who
what are the red flags?
Services? Right. Yeah. Or green flags. Or what? Yeah. And I think that's just a cool way to approach it. Yeah.
It is.
Givers gain, TM.
Yes. And I think too, knowing that anybody who's in this B&I organization, it's kind of, they have their stamp of approval on them, right? Mm-hmm. So I know that if I pass a referral to you, I know they're going to be taken care of well. Mm-hmm. So I could find someone out in Arkansas, right? That's part of B&I. If my parents needed something, and know that they're going to be taken care of because they are a part of this organization. And that's just a really cool thing to be a part of. Yeah. Right? And then, like you said, givers gain. And it doesn't hurt when you get a little bit of business too. So that was fun. A little stutter on the way. So I know that something else we both have in common, we're both transplants here in Chattanooga. Tell me a little bit about kind of what brought you to Chattanooga.
Okay, cool. Yeah, happy to tell that story. Okay, so my career thus far has been in the world of higher education, and particularly like student development outside of the classroom. And so think about things like orientation, student activities, housing, right? Like that kind of realm. And in particular, I've been doing did a lot of behavioral intervention stuff. So student conduct, student misconduct, sexual misconduct, investigations, like that kind of stuff has been my background. And when I was doing that work, I always really felt like I was doing my best work when I was working with students in crisis. And so the case management in student affairs is, it's non-clinical, so it's like you don't need like a psychologist license or social work license or whatever, but you're still helping students who are kind of at their roughest moments get connected to the right resources. And I'd always been wanting to find a job like that. Also rewind, I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. Okay. I found that job posted at University of Texas in Austin, and dream job. So I moved to Austin. I was working in this job. It was hard. It was challenging, but it was, it was what I'd wanted to do. I found out that living in a city like that was too much city for me. I think people think of Austin as being a small town. It's actually pretty big.
Everything in Texas is
well, yeah. And yeah, I would have these kind of like existential things of like, man, going from my apartment to the office is 1 hour just spent in this like concrete corridor. Like, what is that? You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was rough. And then COVID hit. And then, and I'm doing, crisis intervention, right? And so, yeah, so like we processed all kinds of like financial hurdles for people and like helped out with all kinds of stuff. And then the snowstorm hit in 2021. I don't know if you remember hearing about that, but yeah, it was like,
because y'all were hit like back to back to back.
Yeah. And it was like Texas, you don't think of it as being a cold place, but yeah, in that winter there was a week where half the state more or less lost power, and it stayed below freezing for that whole week. And like, that might be one thing if it was in Minnesota, but like in Texas, like nobody has coats. Nobody had, right, the buildings are meant to shed heat, right, not keep it. And so like, I personally had a rough experience, but then also I was also trying to do my job and take care of people who are also going through you know what I mean? So like
but
all this stuff.
Taking care of you.
Nobody, right?
Exactly.
right, exactly. So anyway, all that to say that for me that was kind of like the breaking point of like, okay, cool, I did it. This is great. Time to move back to the Southeast. Look for a job that is not so emotionally involved. So I started applying at different universities kind of around the area, and UTC happened to be the first one to pick me up. And so now I do teacher licensure there for the School of Education, which is essentially just, it's like academic advising, just with the state and state teacher license policies. It's very emotionally removed. And so that's the day job, and then I'm building this podcast business, and really have had a lot of fun with it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was a very long answer to how I ended up here, but
that's
really the takeaway is that it felt like a dart on the map, and it's the best dart I ever threw.
Absolutely, right? Because
I love
you
Chattanooga.
met me.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're part of that picture.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
awesome. I know just from hearing your story too, how much you have overcome, and what a neat thing. Not only did you get to check off that box, right? Being in Texas and like, hey, cool, I did it.
Yep, dream job, yep.
You made it through a really tough season, right? I think we all have these hard seasons, and you did that during a pandemic time when things are already crazy, adding in the snowstorm, adding in being alone, right? And so coming here had to have been kind of refreshing and just such a neat side. Now, I also know the other side of that is you met your wife.
I did.
Tell me about Hannah. We love Hannah.
We love Hannah. Yes, Hannah's great. So I'm pausing because I'm thinking about how long of the story do I tell?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, so.
You're like, I'll tell it all.
I'll tell it all. It's an expose.
Tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Right, yeah, no. Okay, so like you said, when I moved here. I moved to Chattanooga not knowing anybody. And I'm from Asheville. It's a 4-hour drive. So it's like, that's, closer, but it's not home. And so I was trying to start from zero and all that. One of the things I really like to do is go see movies. I used to go weekly just to go see a movie. And so when I first moved here, it was pretty lonely. Another thing about me is I've always really wanted to be a parent. And part of just sort of the situation of leaving Texas and kind of was also, I had an ex who that wasn't, part of their story, right? Okay, yeah. Anyway, so all of that to say is that was really fresh on my mind. It's like, I want a family. I want to be part of a family and raise a family. And I'm here by myself and all of this. And I remember going to see the movie Encanto by myself.
Goodness.
And it's a beautiful movie, right?
Beautiful.
It really is. And also, okay, so my dad's side of the family is Cuban. So I'm half Cuban. Don't look it. They don't look it either.
It resonated with
So it really did, because I mean, that whole story is about this girl who's part of a Hispanic family, and she doesn't quite feel like she's part of that family, right? I mean, there's all this stuff, right? So I also love to cry in movies. So I was, I'm sitting there crying. And so that was within the first few months of moving here. Fast forward. On the dating apps. And I come across Hannah, and she happened to be in Ireland at the time. She was like just doing travel, whatever. And so we were back and forth, and one of the first things that she asked was, or she said, I'm about to get on a plane. Tell me the name of your podcast so that I can listen to it on the plane. And that was so sweet. And a lot of times people on dating apps are like, oh, you have a podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
What's your real job?
Right. So like to get that response was already like really exciting.
Right.
And then when she landed, she had all these things she wanted to ask me about it and how'd you do this and what, all that. So that was lovely. We texted for a couple weeks while she was still over there. Until she came back. And so for our first date, I offered to make dinner for her at my house and had her over and, did that, cooked dinner. She's a musician, I'm a musician. So we're like playing songs, we're talking to each other, like nobody's looking at their phone, like all of this stuff is going on.
It's really intimate, right?
Yeah,
it's really connected.
So time goes on, right? We're it's maybe like 3 or 4 hours. It's like getting kind of late. She's helping me with dishes and all of a sudden we hear this big knock on the door. Like, oh God. Like knocking like that on your door at 10:30 at night is not a good thing, right?
No, it's kind of scary.
So I'm kind of, yeah, exactly. So I'm like worried about it. And so I start kind of like making my way to the door and I hear her behind me go, oh my gosh, I know what this is. I'm thinking, is this an ex? Like, what is this?
Oh,
and well, remember I said we weren't looking at our phones. And remember I said that I had invited her to my house. So her friends hadn't heard from her. They knew that she was going to this strange man's house. They freaked out. She left. And so a sister, a cousin, and a best friend, drove from Calhoun, Georgia, 45 minutes to come bang on my front door and demand, proof
we
of
want her
survival.
back.
Yeah, exactly. So she just opens the door. He's a nice guy. And I hear somebody outside say, well, it would have been nice to know that.
Oh.
So anyway, that was our first date story. And
that's hilarious.
Yeah, and that was summer of last year. And so pretty soon, I had a dating checklist of like who, qualities that I was looking for in a person, and she knocked them out. Like she got all of them and then some really quick, right? And like within about 3 months, we were painting in one of the bedrooms, and I sort of asked, I was like, okay, so you meet my checklist. Is there anything you need to know about me? Or, you know what I mean? Like, what is your shit?
Yeah.
And she was quiet, and she goes, well, to be honest, I've been knowing.
Oh, I love that. I've been knowing.
Yeah. And she so that was our wedding hashtag is hashtag they've been knowing. Oh. And she later corrected me and said that what I actually said, there's not a doubt in my mind. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so, still a sweet story, right?
Not as cute as the other one.
Right. They've been knowing.
Hashtag worthy.
Yeah. And
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that happened. Then in January of this year, we found out we're having a baby. Yeah. Really exciting. All of that family stuff comes through. And we watched, within that first week, we watched Encanto again.
Oh, and it means so much more now. It meant
such a different thing. And as soon as she started singing about, welcome to the family magical, I just lost it. I was bawling. I was just with this person that.
Just overjoyed.
Yeah. It was great. And
that's fantastic.
So really meaningful. And so we got married about a month or two ago, and baby Crosa's coming in October.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Yeah,
I love
really
that.
Excited.
It's one of those things, which we've talked about this, just how do you know, right? I remember always asking, my parents have been together for 40 years. And I would always be like, but how did you know, right? And they're like, you just know. And I'm like, no, but how do you know that you know? Yeah. Like, you just, it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Until it happens to you.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my goodness, like that, it's not something that they can tell you. It's not something anyone can tell you. You just know. It's just this amazing piece, right, that you have. And Nick and I just celebrated our 15th anniversary.
Wow, congrats.
Oh, my goodness, thank you. It happened really fast. That little 20-year-old baby who got married.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, and we've even explained to our children, it will happen a long time from now, right? Because they're almost 14 and 9. Like, nope, a long time from now. But it's not something that you have to look for. It's going to find you when it's supposed to happen, right? But how neat, and how neat too, right? Here, movies, for me, music, any of that, plays, musicals, all of that speaks to me just so deeply, that creative piece, right? And that you can watch something, right? Or hear a song or read a lyric or whatever, and it hits you differently depending on what part of life you're in, what season you're walking through.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
It could remind you of sadness, right? Or build that sadness and longing inside of you. Or it could overwhelm you with the amount of joy that you feel and just gratitude, right? For where you are compared to where you have been. And how neat, right? That we have avenues that allow us to freely express ourselves and feel things that we probably could not navigate on our own, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and with movies, I've heard that a lot of the kind of classic Disney movies, Toy Story or whatever, that, when you're a kid, you see them as a kid, but then as a parent, you realize they're just as much about parenting as they are about being a kid or whatever. And so I'm just excited to see them again.
Yeah, at a whole new level,
see them from
right?
fresh new eyes. Yeah.
It's exciting. Yeah. I love babies. I'm so excited for you. I think that I would have a million more. My husband's like, no, I don't want to be an old dad. He was like, we are not having more. But oh my goodness, babies.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm so excited y'all are having one. But I'm telling you, you will start to see things just through a whole different light. You love your wife, right? Mm-hmm. But when you have a baby, there's just something about it like you can't explain. And then as you start to see yourself or your wife through your child, right? When you're looking into your son's face, like it's just such a joy and get to experience things. All of that is going to be the best.
It's coming. Yeah.
What has been the coolest thing about pregnancy that you have experienced?
Yeah, great question. I think going back to that idea of like just knowing, of like, there are certain pieces of, there are some nervousness, right? I'm not gonna say I'm not nervous, but the things that I'm nervous about are all trivial stuff that I know is gonna get worked out. And the things about like, is this the right person? Yeah, 100%. I'm nervous. Is my family gonna help support. Yeah, 100%. And like that kind of stuff, those big questions, I don't know, it's like almost solidified of like, yes, all of those things are strong yeses and happy yeses. And
that makes it all the sweeter.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
It
Your
really
community.
does. Yeah.
That's
exactly.
fantastic.
Yeah, community, knowing that how much I appreciate Chattanooga, and knowing that, I always say this about the difference between Austin and Chattanooga is Austin gets called a really cool city, and, it is, in my experience, some of the things that were really cool about it is like the live music scene and the bar scene and the things that, you probably didn't want to bring your kid to. And some of the things that makes Chattanooga so cool is the aquarium and the Riverside Parks and like some things that do feel much more fun for all ages and stuff like that. And I just feel confident about being here, and it feels great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, something else that you do outside of UTC and your podcast, your business, you teach some courses at the Chattery.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us about what is so precious about the Chattery.
Okay, so the Chattery it's a really cool concept. They, with the belief that learning is fun, and that as adults that, there should be more opportunities to make friends and do fun things and learn things. They offer a space where people can take classes and learn, and it's usually kind of like one-time classes, like spend an evening, come learn how to knit, or learn, this thing about companion plants for your garden, or, you know what I mean, like that kind of stuff. And it's usually hour and a half. And it's cool. It's a great place to meet people by doing activities. It's a great place to just, learn something new at low stakes. And so I started teaching a voice acting class there about a year or so ago. And one of my other podcasts is called Jollyville Radio. It has a lot of, voice acting and stuff, and at a very like kind of low entry level, like beginner level, I should say. And so, I haven't done voice acting like professionally, but enough that, I could lead a class and have fun and make it meaningful and worthwhile. And so I started doing that, and that was a ton of fun. And then in February of this year, 2023, I was like, well, I have all this podcasting experience. Why don't I start a podcasting class? And so I did my first one in February, and also right about that time is when I launched my local podcast, which you know well, My Part of Town, Chattanooga. And within that month, those two things, launching the podcast and starting teaching podcasting at the Chattery, my phone started ringing. Like I was getting just like random people asking questions about how do I get this set up. Our friend Josh Robinson at the Daily Refresh got in touch and asked me to be on his show. And so that kind of like opened my eyes of like, oh, this is an opportunity, right? Of like, absolutely. I can provide this service, I can be part of this. And so that was sort of how Chattanooga Podcast Studios was born, but even still, like I still will teach classes at the Chattery, and it's fun. Like I said, it's fun. It's low stakes for the people who are coming, and it's a good time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. More information at thechattery.org.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I love, like you said, there's classes for all ages. My favorite thing is when you got real Southern, when you were like, they even offer knitting. Like,
knitting, yeah. Well, funny
like
enough.
Like granny on the porch.
I also taught cross-stitching there. I taught about 3 or 4 different cross-stitch classes.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I love that there is this kind of emphasis on greater education and continuing, even if it's not in the classroom setting, right? Mm-hmm. Even if we're not getting a degree,
right?
You learning you're gaining another skill, right? Do something differently. And once again, we're growing the community, you're building relationships and friendships. And part of, my favorite part of Chattanooga is just the community and how people are friendly. When I met my husband, we met in Illinois. And I was just up there for high school. I told him, I said, look, my goal is to move down south where the tea is sweet and the people are friendly. And after growing up in Atlanta, I really needed a city with a lot of shopping and a lot of friendly faces that held open the door for you. And that's what you have in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're in North Georgia, which is still Chattanooga, right? I mean, all of it. Yeah. What would you say is the most precious thing about Chattanooga and North Georgia?
So cheesy. Hannah was the first thing that came to mind.
And brownie points.
No, I think kind of what I mentioned earlier about just there's a strong community element here. When I was living in Austin, yes, somebody how long they've been here, and like answers like 4 and 5 years were a long time. Right, those were people who had been in Austin for a long time, and talking about transplants. I mean, you've been here 15 years, and you still call yourself a transplant.
I know,
like,
it's weird.
I think that's been the experience of like, and when I've interviewed people for my podcast that's about Chattanooga, sometimes people will say like, oh, well, I've only been here like 20 years, or something like that, and so. There's at the same time that there's this like really long-term love and commitment by the people who live here, there's also space for people like me who just got here 2 years ago. And I think that's really cool, and I think that's really fun, and I think that maybe there are probably some Chattanooga locals who don't like that.
Right.
But I mean, I think most of the people that I've talked to have kind of echoed that it's a great place to be. It's a very welcoming place, and and I want to jump back to something that you reminded me of, talking about like making friends and making connections. Okay, I've got a formula for how to make friends as an adult.
Okay.
And it applies to our situation perfectly. So number one, you need to find repetition. So either being at the same place the same day of the week, or like whatever. Okay. Number two, an activity. So like, oh, let's be friends. Let's go grab coffee. Well, that's not really an activity because you're trying to force a conversation across the table. But if you're doing something, you're engaged in something, you're taking a class at the Chattery, you're doing right. Okay, now there's an activity. And then number three, opportunities for private conversation. And so if you have those three things and you stick at it and you commit to it, you'll make friends.
Yeah.
And that's making this full circle. You and I are engaged in something, BNI. We see each other weekly, and we have the opportunity for private conversation. I mean, it's built into BNI, but also, we're kind of whispering and joking and texting to the meeting and stuff like that. Right, yeah. So
don't announce that. We're not texting during the meeting.
Yeah.
Who?
What?
Who hijacked our podcast?
Yeah.
Yes. No, I think that's great. I mean, I think as you're growing up, right, you think being a child, like, oh, it's so hard and so hard to find friends. Everything will be better when I'm an adult. And then you're an adult and you're like,
yeah. And a lot of things are better. And also, it's hard to actually make friends.
But you're still broke. And it's still hard to make friends until you find your people. But I agree that Chattanooga being the hub, so close to larger cities, Nashville, Atlanta, all of that, but still close enough to have a great community. But you still may not know who you sit next to at dinner. I love that. Yeah. Right? There's always room for more relationship building. I love that. Well, Michael, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, this has been fun. I love this. Thanks for being a piece of what makes Chattanooga so precious to me. And y'all, we can't wait for next episode. Woo! Have a great week, y'all. We'll see you later.
Heather's Most Precious is brought to you with love by the Hendrickson Agency, an insurance agency serving all of Georgia and Tennessee. The Hendrickson Agency, properly protecting your most precious possessions. Support for Heather's Most Precious is provided by Study.com, which offers SAT and ACT study materials and even has resources for AP and college credit courses. Listeners of Heather's Most Precious get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level with offer code PRECIOUS. Just go to Study.com and use offer code PRECIOUS at checkout. Heather's Most Precious is produced by Chattanooga Podcast Studios and is part of the Podnooga Network. Find out more at ChattanoogaPodcastStudios.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of Heather's Most Precious.